Good morning everyone and welcome to the latest episode of On The Whistle, where we're going to be chatting about Sunderland 0, Real Betis 1, and then I'm going to go through all your questions and comments on the game, transfers, injuries, all that stuff, and just generally we'll have a bit of a chat about where Sunderland are at now. Somehow only 2 weeks away from the start of the Premier League season. Exciting and a little bit terrifying in equal measure. So just reflecting a little bit on the game yesterday, I thought it was one where by and large it was a kind of a positive step forward for Sunderland. There wasn't a huge amount of intensity in the game probably after the first half an hour or so, which I thought was a really good watch, really entertaining. That was obviously when most of the best chances of the game for both teams came from. Definitely kind of fell away a little bit in the second half in terms of the tempo and the intensity. But I thought there was a lot of good stuff from Sunderland, in terms of the way they were able to control possession for quite long spells against a really good opponent. You know, this is a team that finished 6th in La Liga last season, reached the Conference League final, managed by a very, very good and experienced operator, Manuel Pellegrini. And I think for Sunderland to limit Betis to very few chances, particularly from open play, all of Betis's best moments really were kind of from set pieces, or kind of like second, third phases of set pieces, was definitely a positive. And the clear big positive from a Sunderland perspective on the day was that their three debutants, who we expect all three of them to be in the starting 11 when the season kicks off, produced really, really composed, effective debuts. I thought Robin Roos didn't have a huge amount to do in the game in terms of like shots, which obviously reflected well on the team in front of him, but looked really, really calm in possession. Seemed comfortable using both feet, which is obviously a big advantage for a goalkeeper in terms of when the opposition come to press you. Confident, as he said he was going to be, and being aggressive and coming to claim crosses. His handling was good. Not a game where we can draw too many conclusions because, as I say, he wasn't worked as much as we probably expect him to be realistically when the Premier League starts, especially against some of the kind of bigger teams in the division. But definitely a solid start. Real Betis I was so impressed with. Jensen Seal picking up a minor injury in training on Friday, which meant he had to be shifted infield to play in central defence. Obviously on opening day we expect him to play at left back. But it is a position he's actually played quite a lot, albeit usually in a back three, but it's something he's done semi-regularly for Atletico Madrid and his national team as well. And Lebris making clear afterwards that, you know, he sees him very much as a left back, but it's definitely an option, and you can see why. I thought that his aerial stuff was really, really good, really dominant in terms of both crosses and long balls forward, dealt with really well. Reads the game well, good awareness, as you would expect for a player of his experience and his awareness. And made just pretty simple decisions on the ball. Didn't try anything particularly extravagant, but the decision making was good and effective, so that was really good to see. Really positive step for him to get an hour under his belt, and no real surprise. Granit Xhaka looked class, really, a real class act. I thought his sort of understanding of when to slow the game down a little bit, get his foot on the ball, let someone keep the ball, get a spell of possession, and understanding then when also to take a bit of a risk, when to ping a first-time pass, when to try and open the defence up was really, really impressive. And of course, on another day, he would have had a lovely assist with that first-time pass around the corner where Idingra took it nicely, but was flagged offside. So that for me was kind of the biggest positive of the day, really, that those three players went in and looked like, you know, there was kind of no adaptation period at all, really. I thought all three of them looked really comfortable. As I say, you can't read too much into it because I would expect the goalkeeper to be worked a lot more in the Premier League season. And I also think with both Reynaldo and Xhaka, probably the fact that this is a relatively low tempo, low intensity game probably suited them a little bit as well. So we'll have to see how they kind of fare when the tempo really steps up in the Premier League season. But I thought even so, there were loads of positive signs in their performances. I think that this is a team moving forward pretty well. I think there's some good partnerships developing all over the pitch. I think if there is one slight concern that you have at this stage of pre-season, it's that obviously the goals aren't really flowing. Liza Miende looks such a threat when someone find him, especially in space and early in moves. But that's probably something that they weren't able to do quite enough yesterday, and that has been a little bit of theme of pre-season. So certainly not panic stations or a huge cause of concern just yet, but that's definitely something that I'm hoping to see something kind of improve in the next couple of weeks. I'd love to see Miende get a goal. I'd love to see Sunderland sort of create a few more clear chances. Now, I spoke to Lebris about this after the game, and one of the things that he mentioned was that he kind of understood sort of that concern, if you like, and where it was coming from. But the one thing that he got a lot of positivity from was he talking about the fact that Sunderland did get into the final third quite a lot against Betis, and that they did have quite a lot of touches in the opposition box. So I think he feels pretty pleased with the way the build-up play is developing. Definitely wants to see something sharpen up in front of goal, but feels like it's something where the building blocks are in place, and that will come in the coming weeks as players sort of sharpen up. So fingers crossed that proves to be the case. So all in all, obviously a little bit of a disappointing result and a few things to work on, but generally speaking, I took quite a few positives away from the game, and hopefully fans who were at the game as well did as well. So get into your questions, have a discussion about a few things. So David says, what's the situation with injuries? Will Triantis and Sealt be staying? So yeah, Triantis has been missing the last few games with a minor knock. I don't think it's anything particularly serious, but he is currently injured. As I mentioned, Jensen Sealt picked up an injury in training on Friday, so that was why he wasn't involved. However, I think it's highly likely that at some stage this month, Sealt will go out on loan. My understanding is that NEC in the Eredivisie, where Sunderland have just signed Robin Roofs from, are looking at taking Sealt on loan and would like to take Sealt on loan. That's not been agreed, and I'm sure there's other clubs interested, but I think the direction of travel seems to me to be that Sealt will eventually go out on loan at some point, and I would imagine that Triantis will probably depart as well. It might depend on incoming business a little bit, but I think the fact that he's not been able to get many minutes in pre-season, it's really hard to imagine he's then going to go into the Premier League side, but we'll wait and see on that one. I don't think a final decision's been made at this point. In terms of the other injuries, so Wilson Isidore is really close. Lebris was hoping that he'd get 25 minutes, half an hour off the bench yesterday, but it just didn't quite happen. So I don't think there's any major concern there. It's a little thigh injury that he picked up during the Sevilla game. You might have noticed if you were watching that game or if you were there. It's just limping a little bit in the second half, and Sunderland have just been ultra cautious with it really. But I think he'll be involved next weekend in one of the two games, obviously, that Sunderland have. So a little bit of a frustration, but I don't think it's a major issue. And then Rigg and Patterson, Rigg for sure is getting closer. I think there's some hope that he might get some minutes next weekend. I think it's difficult to imagine him competing for a starting place against West Ham, just because obviously he's not had many minutes in pre-season, but he's definitely quite closing in on fitness. Lebris has previously said that he expects Patterson to be available for the opening day of the season, which means that in his time frame so far has suggested that he should be able to have some involvement next weekend. So we'll wait and see on that one. I think given how little footballs Patterson's had of late, I think for me, I'm strongly now expecting Ruffs to be the goalkeeper on the opening day of the season against West Ham United. But we will wait and see how that develops. Warren says, where is Isidore? So hopefully I have answered that one. And I've got a question from Andrew Mack just to box off the injuries as well. He says, any time frame on Mundell return? Not at the moment. I don't have a specific time frame, Andrew. I will try and get an update on that maybe for next week's edition of On the Whistle. But as I say, my understanding was that it was a relatively serious injury. So as I think I've reported on these videos a few times before, I don't have an exact time frame, but obviously Luke O'Nien, Ajay Elise, Dennis Sitek and Leo Kjeld, the time frame was kind of after the first international break. Personally, I'd be surprised if we see Mundell before then as well. And I think there's a possibility he could miss a few games after that, but I don't have that kind of finalised and definite, so I don't want to speculate too much. But I definitely think, Andrew, that he'll miss the first few fixtures of the season. I would be surprised if that changed, but we'll wait and see, and hopefully I can get you a more specific update, if you like, next week. So keep an eye on that. I'll chase that one up. So the next thing that quite a lot of you are asking me about, so we'll have a bit of a chat that now, is John says, what next for Dan Neil? No minutes today and seemingly second choice midfielder. Contract situation not helping either. Martin says, no game time for Dan Neil today. Contract situation still unresolved. Do you think there is a new contract offer on the table, or would the club look to sell this summer? I'm sure I had another question on this one. Yes, I did. Can we read anything into the fact that Dan Neil and Patrick Roberts didn't get any minutes today, even Brown to a lesser extent? That one's from Clayton Lumsden. So yeah, thanks for your questions. Sunderland have definitely wanted to get Dan Neil to sign a new deal over the last year. I'm not entirely sure why that hasn't happened. It was something that I kind of assumed would get wrapped up quite quickly this summer, to be honest, after promotion, but evidently that hasn't happened. I genuinely don't think that has any impact on the fact that he's not getting many minutes at the moment. I asked Labrise that directly after the whole game, and he said that the contract situation has absolutely no impact on my decisions. And I take Labrise at his word on that. And I think with Daniel and Roberts, I just think we're seeing Labrise's really ruthless side, and I'm a little bit surprised by it. I thought there would be a significant overhaul this summer. I knew that there'd be players coming in, and I knew that Labrise would be ruthless, but Neil and Roberts were two of the ones who I kind of expected to have a greater involvement this season. Probably Anthony Patterson as well, but I think clearly his injury situation has also kind of forced Sunderland to do more business as well, so that is a factor. I think there's a chance that both these guys get minutes this season. I don't think they're being frozen out, or I don't think they're being pushed out the door or anything to that extent. If you look at Sunderland's midfield options, they currently have basically 6 central midfielders for 3 positions, which is about right for a long season. We know about the African Cup of Nations. We know there'll be injuries, suspensions, dips in forms. So Sunderland definitely want Dan Neil to be part of their squad. And similarly with Roberts, like at the moment, they don't have a lot of depth in wide areas. But I think the fact that they've had so few minutes in the kind of stronger team so far in pre-season, I do think is telling. I don't think there's any other way to look at it. I'm really surprised that Roberts hasn't had a start in the stronger team, if you like, or more minutes off the bench yesterday, because I've been increasingly impressed with Chemsdean Talby. I think he's finding his feet. I think he looks more confident. He's grown in his conviction, and I think Sunderland's kind of patience with him in pre-season is starting to pay off. But I really feel like from what we've seen so far, Patrick Roberts has the quality to be in contention to play a big part against West Ham, and I'm really surprised that we've not seen more of him. And I find that really interesting. Similarly with Dan Neil, everyone who watches these videos know how highly I rate Dan Neil, and quite often I get some criticism from some of you who don't really share my opinions, which is all part of the fun. But yeah, so I'm surprised that he hasn't featured more. And I think it's obvious that as the window develops and heads into a final stage, is that if the situation doesn't change at all, I would imagine that both players will be considering their futures. But I think it's a little too early to be speaking too much about that, because I said there's a lot of factors into it, and the fact that Labrise is naming him in these stronger squads suggests that he does feel that they can play a part. But the one thing he has said is that the gap to the Premier League is massive, and he has said with Dan Neil that the players need time to grow their confidence at this level and to adjust to this level. So yeah, I think Labrise has shown his ruthless side, but I don't think we can read anything into it beyond the fact that he's just making quite a ruthless selection decision at the moment, and he seems to be kind of laying the marker down to these players that the opportunity's there for them, but they need to step up. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that one develops in the next couple of weeks. I think it's really telling that neither were either used as substitutes yesterday. I have to say that I was really surprised by that. So hopefully I've boxed that off a little bit. What was this is the other one that lots and lots of people are asking about, which I completely understand. Michael says, overall, a decent performance against a good team. On a different day may have included a goal or two. Happy-ish with midfield net options we now have, but please tell us there will be some progress on the centre-back and striker options this week. Howie 2008 says, do you think we get Meppen back, Phil? We need reinforcements. Ian says, with Seal's injury and potential loan, it makes the centre-back need for a centre-back even more evident, and I thought we needed one anyway. And there was another question, the adventures of Mr. and Mrs. Easted, who says, what would your ideal centre-back signing be? So yeah, I think, so first and foremost, at this stage, I'd be a little bit surprised if Chris Meppen came back, just because I think if he was going to come back, I think that Sunderland would already have done it, to be honest. I think it's been clear to me this summer that Sunderland are kind of looking at other options first and foremost, because I think they feel that they want a kind of close to elite player, really, to go straight in and play alongside Dan Ballard, and obviously Luke Onan can compete within that context. And I think the links and the bids that Sunderland have made for players like John Lukumi sort of underline that. So yeah, I'd be surprised if Meppen came back. I think Sunderland know they need a centre-back. I would be absolutely staggered if they didn't get one in before the West Ham game, genuinely staggered. But they're trying to wait to get a real big player who can improve the team immediately, and I think that's why we're seeing this delay, because they're trying to get the balance right between knowing they need that player, but also getting someone who can improve the team. In terms of my ideal centre-back, well, it's really difficult because I'm quite often sign good players that you've never heard of. What I would say is that Lukumi is a player I love watching Serie A, and Lukumi's a really good player who I think would add massively to this team. He's a really good defender, but he's also excellent in possession. And I think he would really give Sunderland a different dimension in terms of what he can do building out from the back. So Lukumi's a player I would love to see happen. So fingers crossed for some progress on that one. But yeah, I think Chris Metton's a player I couldn't have more respect and admiration for. I thought he was brilliant last season on and off the pitch, especially given how little football he'd had coming into the club. But yeah, I'd be surprised if at this point he came back, because I think if he came back, he'd be going into kind of a squad role where he would get some minutes, but I don't think he'd be a regular starter. I'm not sure that's what he needs at this stage of his career anyway. I think the reason he came to Sunderland last season was to play, because obviously he'd had some time on the fringes of a Premier League squad. So it's just one that all summer I've never quite felt was gonna work out for anybody. So I still haven't really changed my mind on that, but obviously we will wait and see. So the last one I'm gonna go for is one that a couple of you asked. Dino says, from Lefebvre, Diarra, Siddiqui, Xhaka, who starts? And I also had a question from Johnny, who says, who are your 3 starting centre midfielders for the West Ham game? Yeah, so if I had to pick it now, to be honest, it would be Xhaka, Siddiqui and Lefebvre. That's based on what I've seen in pre-season. For me, I just think Siddiqui has been excellent in every game apart from the Hearts one, when obviously you had a little bit of a nightmare on a couple of occasions, but generally speaking, love his energy, love the way he breaks up the play. I think he's more than decent in possession, gets forward well. I really like what he brings alongside Xhaka. Xhaka has to start, I think that's obvious. And for me, I don't think you can leave Lefebvre out because of his capacity to create something from nothing. And also he's a really hard worker as well, so he does press well. Now, I say that, the thing is, like, I've been impressed at times with Diarra. At the moment, I would put the other 3 ahead of him in terms of the performances I've seen in pre-season. I think you see flashes from Diarra when he drives with the ball and he sort of gets into good areas where it just looks like the opposition can't stop him. And it leads me to think that there's a lot more to come from him in terms of when the intensity of the games step up and when the competitive of the games step up. I'm wondering if we'll see a really kind of different side of Diarra and he'll really thrive in that scenario. I think there's a lot more to come from him. So I'm not saying that from a negative perspective, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Diarra's in the team for West Ham United, but answering the question, like, honestly, in terms of who I would pick if the game was tomorrow, that would be my decision. But as I say, I wouldn't be surprised if Diarra played potentially, rather than Siddiqui. But I just really like Noah Siddiqui. I think he's been excellent. So there we go. I've waffled on for quite a while now, so I'm going to bring a close to it. Let's hope that there'll be some news on a centre-back soon, and I'll be able to come and do one of my transfer videos on whoever that new centre-back might be. But yeah, thanks so much as ever for sending your questions and comments in. Still really enjoying doing this, really appreciate the support for it. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again very soon.